this is real life, and we all have our moments. It's hard. It's hard to be a human on this planet right now, and there are many people who are kind of burying their head in the sand and just, going for the zombie thing because it's easier. I mean, meditation is a self-hypnosis, so you start to use the mind, which is a great tool and a time-space machine, and you can travel anywhere simultaneously, literally instantaneously. So it's an incredible gift that we've been given. People are waking up at mass speed on this planet. And one thing that I will say that is my big message right now is the majority of the people on the planet want to live in a generous way. If you can become in any way an inspiration to another human being, that's a victory.
I ain't gon' lie, I think 90% of them weak and shouldn't be mentioned with me. They try mentioning me and watch how in it they'll be. Like Omar Deep, forgetting that God is really with me. The odds are really with me. I see me like Khaled in the side, 10-car garage, but only having 2, cause how many can I drive at the same time? But right now I'm in limbo, not a limbo. I got problems letting the past go. To my exes, I'm an asshole, but to the world, I'm a light. What's it gonna take to let this?
Isn't it? Welcome to Reality Riffing. We have an incredible guest today that I'm so honored to be able to spend some time with, Madame Kiran Gandhi, artist, activist, musician, percussionist, feminist, and just really an example of what it means to be kind of a new era woman on this planet, in my opinion, and human. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Guru Jagat, and thank you for letting me play your gong this morning.
It's pretty amazing, this thing. Like, it's a planetary experience.
It is.
Yeah.
And it is. And honestly, I'm reading this book right now. It's called Effortless Mastery. And I think it's good for all musicians to read, when they're in like a professional phase of their career, because when you're performing and your work is your music, sometimes you forget to return to the simplicity of just playing for joy. Yeah. And this book has been all about that. And it's helped me so much. I've just been playing guitar for literally no purpose but to play the guitar in that moment, or playing this hung drum I have. And for how much we're out there performing and traveling on a stage, it's good to have that joyful balance. And I was reminded of that just now playing this gong. Yeah,
it's very much, the personal practice of creativity. I was just talking about this morning with some of the women who, practice with us. The personal practice of creativity that is outside of whatever professional kind of container that's happened from your own mastery. I feel like it's the way to keep the chi moving in everything we do.
Yes, and to feel joyful. Honestly, even the word productivity has kind of been robbed from us because it's become a very capitalist word. Yeah. We in this society are only valued for how productive we are, which is actually why we have so many issues with paternity and maternity leave, because we don't value societies for giving birth. We value them for going to the office and doing work. But the actual word productivity, I have a line in one of my songs where I'm like, I'm productive like my ovaries, And if you think about productivity, it's very similar to creativity. And we as women give birth to the world. We have a flow of energy from our very anatomy. And I think that's so profound. So I've been trying to reclaim this word productivity, not to mean like how valuable I am to the capitalist patriarchy. Right. But instead, how much joy and creativity and value am I delivering to my community?
It's I feel and we make this joke, any kind of revolutionary experience has to be defined by the redefinition or the creation of a new lexicon. That's the ultimate. So we one of my amazing women on my team was like, every revolution has to have its own press and its own radio, which is why we started Rama Radio.
So smart. That's really so true.
It's true.
And one thing about, there's so much to talk about. This is so exciting.
So much.
I was going to share that one thing about sort of this fourth wave movement, specifically in feminism, is that it relies so heavily on social media for the better. And the reason is twofold. One is we saw this mapping of the online to the offline world with the Women's March, with Black Lives Matter, with so many movements today where we're giving people a way to move from behind their phones into the streets. And we had the largest single day march of the entire nation's history of the whole world. Because of this social media aspect. And then the second aspect is that we get to control the narrative, which is precisely what you're saying. This idea that instead of me feeling like for me to connect to my fans, I have to be like more naked and sexual, which is how women have always been presented. I can actually control my own media, my own narrative, my own messaging, and people can choose to follow my work. So it is profound that we have these tools to be radical.
It's so profound, and I just put this post on my social media this morning, which is from Jello Biafra, who I'm going to read this. I love this quote you have about punk rock, which is something like punk rock can come from anywhere. I'm misquoting it, but I just read it. Oh, punk rock can come from anywhere. Yeah,
100%.
So Jello Biafra says, "Don't be afraid of the media. Become the media." And I feel that's what's happening very much in this time. What I would call the Aquarian age. That's kind of the yogic term for it. But whatever you want to call this age, and you're using a term, fourth wave feminism, which I've heard you use before. Can you explain what you mean by that to our listeners?
Yes, I think that each wave, specifically of this movement for gender liberation, let's say, has had different focal points depending on the era. So the earliest sort of documented, and it's almost problematic to say the first because obviously have there been many women's movements of the past, of course, and we do live in a world that has tended to document white history over histories of other minorities. But we saw in the 1920s suffragists in London rise up to get the vote.
Right.
And then we saw in the 1960s, which was considered the second wave, this fight for reproductive health, the ability to have the abortion, the ability to be free in your own sexuality, the bra burning aspect. It was very lined up with the civil rights movement and the radicalism of the 60s. And then more later in the 80s and 90s was the third wave. For me, the third wave was about queer liberation, about getting into the workplace, about having access and safety in the workplace, about financial security, about divorce security, things like that. And for me, the fourth wave, beyond the social media component, for me, the fourth wave is instead of us as women, it's just perfect because you already talked about this in terms of like redefining the system. But I'm so interested, instead of us as women trying to figure out how to break into hip hop, how to break into politics, how to break into the corporate world. Right. I'm on this tip, like, let's go start our own stuff. Let's go build the alternative. And so when I say the future is female, it has very little to do with anatomy, and it's more about us valuing femininity as an alternative archetype for leadership.
Yes.
What can we learn from the femme, as we say, the divine feminine in all of us? Men, men oppress each other, by the way. Men oppress each other sometimes more than they oppress the women. Yeah. And feminism is about healing that hyper masculinity and that obsession we have with masculinity to create alternative structures of leadership. So for me, once you start to combat misogyny, which to me is in a future that is female, you start to combat transphobia, transmisogyny, homophobia, all of these things that are holding us down. So that's, to me, the fourth wave.
That's fourth wave. Great. I love that. And something that I talk about a lot is that the patriarchal kind of confusion and kind of misinterpretation of what it means to be human and build a society that works for all, which is, my opinion, what's happened in the past couple thousand years. There's been other misinterpretations and forgetfulness over big cycles of time, but certainly that's what we've kind of been going through, this kind of after Christ experience, or whatever you want to call AD. But all of us have suffered. All genders, all races, all nationalities, all sex, whatever identification, whatever age, we've all suffered under the misunderstandings. And so I think that's really what's happening now is, and for those of, people like you and people doing the good work on the planet, we're just, and it's an unprecedented time, in my opinion, which is why I think it's so important, the work that you're doing, because we're, really on a daily basis, we're establishing what that kind of new archetypal resonance is, and it's an experiment.
It's kind of trickling in through pop culture even. You know, I watched Wonder Woman, which ended up being one of the biggest box office superhero movies we've seen in decades.
Yeah.
And the subliminal messaging in Wonder Woman is very future is female, and it has nothing to do with female versus male, male versus female. It's simply about saying, to make the world not self-destruct, we have to say, how can we take care of it? How can we teach with love? How can we actually use nurturing and vulnerability as strengths and assets? How do we not fight each other with a brute force ego and instead fight each other with our brain power?
Yeah.
And to me, that was the future is female. And even in this movie Justice League, where Wonder Woman is the only female superhero in a league of 5 or 6 men,
right.
Of course, there were 1 or 2 sexual remarks. I'm sure the men who wrote it couldn't help it. But for the most part, I felt proud for the first time that the way they showed the solidarity between the characters didn't have a sexual current and had this like solidarity current. And it made me feel happy, like we're moving in a direction.
Absolutely. I think that the Wonder Woman franchise and what it's going to become and what it already has established, and I haven't seen the new one, but I feel like there's certainly some major pop culture building blocks have been established, keystone building blocks. Now, she's gorgeous, but I would love for there to be a little bit more body positivity. But she's amazing.
But tall, I guess you're right. We do tend to be tall as like a model, but I feel like also tall women we tend not to value that in our society because it's like too masculine or something. Of course, she's a model.
But so aren't we all? But aren't we all, girl?
I love that. Yeah. So no, I agree with what you're saying. I did feel that she had a nuanced look to her. I liked that it wasn't like she's beautiful, but maybe not in like a constructed way that we tend to see in Hollywood.
Yeah, and I do. Even the female director, who I don't remember her name, but I read an article where she even was admitting, and this is where the patriarchy, it's so easy to control a group of people who have basically swallowed and metabolized the control matrix so that they do it themselves, and that's what we're detoxifying totally. And she even admitted, like not in that way, but she was saying that she wanted the girl next door, and the studio kind of fought her on again, I can't remember the actress's name. They fought her on her because, and she wanted a little bit more of like the American girl next door. So just in that, you're seeing these the things,
classic stereotypes
coming out.
With Gal Gadot, though, she has her power though has like a femme power. I think there's been like a problematic archetyping of women when men make these quote unquote feministy films that like the women have to masculinize in order to be like girl power.
Right. And
I'm really not interested in that. I'm really not interested in us teaching young girls to masculinize, or that like strong women are the kind of quote unquote what's that, like ball buster archetype that we see in like the wearing a suit in the office place.
Right.
You know, I'm not interested in women becoming men in order to lead. I'm not interested in that. We will always lose at their game because they wrote the rules to that game. I'm interested in us creating alternatives and having the men come to us and be like, oh my God, the team can be like joyful and positive, and we can actually like eat vegan food and take care of each other, and like what a concept. I mean, even if now that I'm thinking about it, if you look at even the tech companies, the fact that like LinkedIn and all these major places have yoga studios and gym wellness centers built in, it's a little bit contrived, but it's also, to me, that is future is female. The fact that we're valuing taking care of ourselves and taking care of your employees as a way to make sure they're comfortable at their job, that's good leadership.
It certainly is shifting, and I always make the kind of point that Rome fell. There's a poem. I think it's actually by a man, but he's like Finnish or something, so I can't tell. But I think it's by a man. But it was translated by another man that I really love named Robert Bly. But it's called Dark Mother Scream, and the last line is, "Remember that Rome fell because they forgot Dark Mother Scream." And it's one of like the totem kind of like poems.
That's very futurist female.
Very, and also just what we're seeing
right now.
Right now.
We are in this last hyper machismo.
I mean, we're in the last gasp of it.
Yeah, who are we gonna put up against number 45? That's what we have to think about.
Yeah, we do, especially because part of what we've seen, which I think is a very powerful lesson, is just that, like, even if Hillary Clinton, well, I'll go here. Even if Hillary Clinton had, beyond politic, I'm talking just like the energy of what it means to embody the feminine.
And she wouldn't be that. She's not that.
Well, she's coming from second wave feminism, and I think it was very much a reaction.
Totally, and that's why we needed her. We needed that person to show us what that looks like, so that we can then build on that and maybe try a different alternative.
Yeah.
Even Michelle Obama, to me, is a good example of leading from the femme, or Oprah, or a Beyonce character, even, because the way, or Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, like I feel like the way they lead is very femme, which is what makes everyone so captivated by it, because we don't even get to see that. In the whole history of the universe, there's only been 19 female presidents or prime ministers of countries. 19. Right. There's more male CEOs named John than there are female CEOs, period.
Right.
Named John.
Whoa.
Yeah. So we don't even, it's like, give us a chance to even show you what that alternative can even look like. We might mess it up worse than the men, but let us at least try.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Someone asked me the other day, it was a panel on toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And a guy raised his hand. He said, well, what does toxic femininity look like? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I was a little stumped because no one's ever asked that. And I answered him similarly how I mentioned before, which was like, I don't even know, because we don't even have enough examples of like female leadership. So let us get there.
Right.
But I reflected on it for the days after. And I think toxic femininity is emotional bullying. Yeah. So instead of us being emotionally intelligent when we lead, that we are emotionally manipulative, and that we use the ability to be loving and kind, but for twisted purposes, for something dark.
Yeah.
Similarly to how men have the ability maybe to physically be strong and use that power for good, and they can also use that power to kill or to murder or to rape or to be aggressive. I think that to me was what toxic femininity looks like. And we have plenty of examples of that today.
We do. And also I would say that, femininity that is maybe out of balance. Like I won't even go to toxic yet, because I don't think we have a lot of example. But I think when it's out of balance and it doesn't have ground or have something to contain it, there's irrationality. Yes. Certainly, I mean, there. Again, like that's why the whole kind of Rubik's Cube of the shift of this age has to happen, because women have to learn how to ground themselves in ways that are they can find. I mean, in my opinion, spiritual practice is really about opening yourself and allowing the God self to become everything that is, which is really making love to yourself. It's intercourse, and when women have the capacity, this is what I teach women, when they have the capacity to do that, then they are more whole, and then they're better leaders and better mothers and better business people. And the same thing for men, when they have the capacity to feel into what's happening, and also accept their irrationality and the places in them that are,
and that it's okay,
that it's totally
right.
I mean, I think we see with our current president a man who is totally out of balance with his feminine side. I'm not even talking about the masculine. I'm talking about the feminine, and I mean
pull
by
him back a little bit,
the emotionality,
energy,
the irrationality,
awareness,
the toxic feminine of the those parts of him that if they were embodied and he actually felt what he was feeling instead of freaking, I'm saying I'm taking all gender away from it. I'm talking about the feminine kind of. He's a great example of that being completely unbalanced. And I mean, I'm not talking about what the toxic masculine parts are, but that's obvious. But yeah, and I do feel like we have a little bit of a win politically in our country recently, right now. What's your opinion on this? I haven't been following it super close, but I know that we have a trans senator, right?
Yes, I think that it's been amazing. It's the person who who wrote the bathroom bill preventing people who identify as trans from choosing the bathroom of their choice. That person got defeated, and it was a first Sikh person got elected to office, Vietnamese. I mean, it was very, very powerful. And it's true. I mean, when you have a common enemy to unite against, then it is easier to do the educative work. And even for this fourth wave of feminism, it's something that everyone can get behind, because now they can see the exact problems. We have sound bites of the person who's in office making sexually assaultive comments.
Right.
So everyone from a cerebral standpoint can understand what this message is about.
Yeah.
Earlier today, I spoke with someone in India Today, journalist, because I'll be going to India to perform for the first time in 3 weeks, which is so exciting.
So exciting.
Which we have to talk about in a moment. I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah.
But he asked me, how does your message relate specifically to people here in India? And I said, my message is twofold. The first is about owning your voice. Like, for me, feminism is about combating taboo and stigma. If you ask me, stigma is one of the most effective forms of oppression, because it denies us the ability to speak comfortably and confidently about something that we've experienced. So whether that might be menstruation, which is a big part of my work, whether that might be sexual experiences, sexual trauma, or sexual joy, on either side of the spectrum, we can't talk about these very natural and normal things because it's so deeply stigmatized. And I think that falls on the burden of women. I think that men have a word for they have words for masturbation. They have colloquial words for that. We as women we're so far away because we don't want to think of women as sexual beings.
Right.
But if that's the case, well, who are the straight men having sex with? It's like, why do we have to act like women are not sexual beings? It's so unfair to us. And so that's this first aspect, own your voice. And then the second aspect is about sexual positivity. So many times when we talk about female sexuality, it's always in the context of something sad, about rape or sexual assault or sexual harassment in the workplace.
Right.
And so then, which needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
But I want to live in a world where we as women learn our own anatomy, that we're not learning about our own vaginas like from Broad City decades later, or like, or I don't even know. I feel upset that we rob young women of being able to enjoy their sexuality in an open, free way, as opposed to everyone having to like Google in silence and like hope for the best.
Right. Turn off the lights and hope for the best is what I call it.
Yeah.
We call that a life.
And it's like, that the tragedy is that the men and the boys' first experience into sex is watching pornography.
Yes.
At such a young age, they're watching pornography. And so then you're watching something that's like sex is defined by like the male experience in those pieces of content because it's catered towards men. Yeah. And the women are faking it. And the way they treat the female anatomy is actually very violent, if you ask me. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with fantasy, but I think we have to ask at whose expense is that fantasy? And then also, what is it then teaching young people when they go and have these experiences for in real life? They're desensitized and they don't know how to treat the female anatomy.
No, I mean, I often have young men who are beautiful young men who are really like trying to be different than maybe their fathers, or I mean, there's really like, you can feel in them that they're trying to meditate, they're trying to show up for their relationship or their whatever the thing is. And I often have them come to me saying, I am messed up because of my pornography addiction, or the way that I learn sex from pornography. Right. So again, like, it's not just the women. We're all suffering under the heaviness. And I also feel that what has happened, and I don't know if we would call this where we would define this in the third wave, fourth wave feminism, but I think that a lot of women have co-opted casual sex and kind of promiscuity as a way
liberation,
of saying,
but I don't think that's right for us. I just had this conversation with somebody else, but no one wants to admit that because it sounds like it's a power trade-off.
Yes.
But I actually completely agree with you. I think it is more the male energy to want to sleep with a lot of people to their demise. Yeah. Well, that's their choice. But I do think that for the female energy, penetration is like a very specific thing. And it's I think you do get triggered to fall in love. I do think your hormones shift. That like when you love someone that you're sleeping with, it's enormously powerful and healing. And that sleeping with a lot of people does, I think, affect you in a different way that may not be right for us. But this upsets people, Guru Jagat. It does. I never say it out loud because I'm like, I want everyone to be on their own journey. But personally, I agree with that. I've always found it much more enjoyable to go deeper with one person over time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can look all sorts of ways, but if you don't have the baseline of kind of your own dignity and integrity of your own sexuality, you won't know if you want to be. I have no problem with having a lover for one night in a way that's art, making art, but we wouldn't know because we really have no role models in this way, nor would we know. I mean, the long-term relationship thing, we have a 75% divorce rate. My teacher, Yogi Bhajan, said that rate is equivalent to the women who are sexually unsatisfied in the culture. I think it's higher than that, but because I think probably 15% of the women will stay in the relationship even though they're sexually unsatisfied. So we just, we have an epidemic. And honestly, we were speaking. I didn't know this before the show, but your father's Sikh, and I have, because my teachers are Sikh, and I'm also, this tradition has certain, we use the mantras, and there's definitely a connection of the kind of more esoteric and spiritual aspects of Sikhism. But when I've spoken about female orgasm and spoken about sexuality in certain ways, I've been attacked by a lot of religious Sikhs because I wear a turban, because and so it's been, and I said this to my team, I was like, God forbid I talk about female orgasm.
Yeah.
I mean, that really, it went it was such a reaction about that, that it really amazed me, actually. I mean, I am a Western woman in a way, so maybe I've been in a bubble.
But you're a spiritual seeker. That's the point. It's like, and I think that's to our earlier point about us as women not going to try to break into hip hop or break into politics, etc. It's like, maybe the same must be true for religion.
Yeah.
The day that all of these religions are made by men, and I think so much of it has joy in it. It has a lot of deep morality and dignity, as you mentioned earlier. But I do think no matter what, the people who are making the rules about our bodies are not experiencing them. Just as right now, the people in political office who are making rules about abortion and sexual reproductive health are not going to ever receive the burden of those rules. Yeah. So how can we trust it? Yes. How can we trust it if the decision maker, whatever decision they make, would never affect them on a physical level? It's not fair.
No.
And so, to that point, I don't know why men are so obsessed with controlling our sexuality. I think maybe they realize deep power within it, or they understand that the second that we are physically satisfied, that marks the beginning of us stepping into our own power. But what they have to realize is that unlike male power over female power is never at the expense of men. I've never seen it that way. It's actually, when I'm my best self, I actually find myself even more able to give love.
Yeah.
It's never, when I feel powerful, it's never like me being aggressive to men. It just doesn't look like that.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that we are dealing with a little bit of, let's say not a little bit. I think we're dealing with, and I'm not saying that it's not part of the detoxification, but I think we are dealing with some pretty big collective consciousness, anger, kind of releases right now, particularly with women. And I think on a lot of platforms that are holding, maybe we'll call fourth wave feminism or whatever, or have a broadcast of that kind of conversation going on. I have found lately that there is a little bit more aggression and a little bit, which is understandable.
Of course.
And it needs to be released.
Yes.
It's like a pimple. It has to be, it has to be released. It has to be cleaned out. But then I think that there also has to be
the healing.
Yeah.
I always say that I intellectualize my emotions and my anger. And the reason why I say that is because when I was younger and I hadn't learned quite yet how to manage my anger and my thoughts about these different forms of oppression, when I would engage in conversations with my father, my brother, my male classmates, it would always end in tears or anger or a fight.
Yeah.
And it would frustrate me because I would say, first of all, I feel like these men get it. So then why are we fighting about it? Why does it always feel so personal? And it was only until I started reading and starting being able to peacefully explain with words and with logic and with empathy and with kindness some of these dynamics and how systems of oppression work and what our intention is with modern day feminism, that slowly I've found that I've been able to win the support over of a lot of men, and not only win them over, but actually allow them to find deep truth and healing in the things that we're talking about, not only in my music, but in discussions like these.
Right. And
also, I'll say with anger, it's a lot of reasons why people shy away from the word feminism. They associate it with sort of an image from the 60s and 70s of an angry, masculine-looking woman protesting.
Right.
And I always tell the men or other women, I'm like, if you experience even a fraction of the kind of oppression that women in this country faced in the 60s and 70s, of course you'd be angry.
Yeah.
Of course you'd be angry.
Yeah.
And that we needed that anger in order to have the building blocks that allow us to continue our mission today.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about us allowing that anger to happen, but channeling it into emotional intelligence and being able to explain these things peacefully and with logic.
And how would you tell people who want to educate themselves, who want to be able to somehow engage either in their own personal journey around their own revolutionary choices or in some sort of activism? What would you tell them in how to do that? I mean, I think I'm very much a how person. What's like, do you have a personal practice to do that?
Definitely.
Or is there some...
First of all, come to a Madame Gandhi show.
Yeah.
First of all,
Which
listen
is
to a
spiritual experience.
Come to a Madame Gandhi show, the feminist church. Come listen to a record. Come watch a music video. Come watch a talk. But for me, I love to read some of the classic feminist theorists. Angela Davis, Catherine McKinnon, Gloria Steinem. The list goes on. Truly. Yeah. And the second would be to actually kind of like protect your own social media and pop culture consumption. I don't watch most television because it kind of bums me out in terms of like the state of where we are. Most television for some reason is still so deeply violent. I just find it toxic. Even if the show is interesting, I don't watch it because I think it's really violent.
And often violent towards women.
And it numbs us and normalizes it. So you have to actually not watch that. So then if you ever see it one-off, you have the clarity of brain to check it and call it out as a problem.
Right.
The more we watch TV and the more we bake ourselves into this society, it's very difficult to actually criticize what's problematic because we're so in it and we've internalized so much of it. Yeah. So I really only consume pop culture that I think can nourish or educate me. The other day I was watching Broad City, which is, for anyone who doesn't know it, 2 young female comedians going through their life in New York City, just being ridiculous, being sexually liberated, making mistakes, learning, being stupid, being funny, being joyful, all of it. Being 3-dimensional, which we never get to see.
Right.
And there was a line there that I literally rewinded it to learn this line, and it's this one, the main character tells another older woman that she made some money today and she's so happy, and the woman responds to her and says, money is a mind control tactic used to quantify the progress of the patriarchy. And I was like, what?
That's some good writing.
Right. I was like, what? And I rewound it and like memorized this statement and like said it as a mantra. Money is a mind control tactic used to quantify the progress of the patriarchy. And I was just like, mind is blown. Wow. So for anyone listening, I do think consuming pop culture and entertainment and even music that only can uplift and potentially educate you.
Yes.
And allow us to continue to check and question society's most problematic norms. That allows us to process and intellectualize our anger.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll add that, and I feel like this is part of what you're saying, but don't want to put words in your mouth, is that there is something about being able to, I feel like at least in the spiritual circles, people, or in other circles, people are apathetic for other reasons, but in the spiritual circles, it's like this kind of wash, like broad stroke, spiritual kind of bypassing, for lack of a better term, so that, I'm too sensitive to watch the news, or I'm too sensitive to know what's going on out there, I'm too sensitive to, or, I've gotten too spiritual, like it doesn't matter. That kind of stuff happens a lot in the spiritual scene. I think people get apathetic for other reasons in other scenes, but I do feel like when you're kind of controlling the input broadcasts And even if I was sitting next to some guy who was watching CNN during the Las Vegas kind of shooting time on a plane, and I didn't hear it, I was just watching it, and I was just watching the hypnotic kind of pulse of the way that they put it's like, well, we were afraid of this, but we just found out something to be more afraid of. Like, I mean, literally, like the things just going across the screen and the thing. But
very sensationalist.
Very sensational. They're money making.
Money.
They're money making off of your fear. So, but I feel like it's very important, your own sovereignty of input and output, which to me is actually the definition of being a yogi or being someone who's spiritual, is that you have sovereignty over what's going in and sovereignty over what's going out.
Oh my God, you just blew my mind. That's it. I need to learn that. I'm even more so.
Yeah.
And I'm a Pisces. We're the most sensitive.
Yes.
We want to let everything in. But I think each of us have like this journey where it's like, I can know myself, and I can know that like if I watch even like the commercial for a scary movie, I may not be able to sleep that night. Like that's really real. So I can either take one of two strategies, which is with all of our personality traits. The first is to say, I need to change. I need to be like tough. I need to watch more so that I'm not scared, or like I need to like not be late for stuff all the time. Like you try to change yourself. Or the opposite is to just say, okay, this is who I am. It's been like this for 12 years. It's not changed. It's been like this since I was a child. It's always going to be like this. So instead, I need to just put that my meeting is half an hour earlier in my calendar than it actually is. Or like I need just avoid. Yeah, right. I need to just avoid these kinds of movies because I know I won't be able to sleep at night, and that's just who I am. Yeah. Or I cannot watch violence towards women in movies because it breaks me. I can't watch that stuff. Yeah. So to your point, I am on this journey of controlling what I let into my energy. Yeah. But I'm not all the way there yet, because even when I perform on a stage, and if the sound person is rude to me, or if the person who's like opening doors bullies me a little bit, or the person who's supposed to pay me does something strange, it does affect my energy. I have like anxiety in my stomach about it because I've let them in instead of having a protective surface. So I really resonate with that. And my parents are all about that. My dad always says, shut out the noise. My mom is very spiritual and always talks about not letting things bother us that shouldn't. Yeah. Thank you for teaching me that.
It's discipline. It really is like some of the ultimate mind training, because there was some sort of social media meme, which usually is just cliche consciousness, but I thought this one was good, which is remind yourself to not care about the things you don't care about. It's good. That's like a good, I mean,
and when I care all the way. So it's like I gotta relax sometimes.
Yeah, you gotta.
Can you say this statement again? Yogi is about what?
What I'm defining as a yogi, or someone who's practicing spirituality, is someone who has sovereignty over the input and the output.
Yes.
So whether that's something you're putting in your mouth, whether that's something you're taking into your mind. Yogi Bhajan was, I think, a huge futurist, and the body of his work, 40 years, was taking women and training them how to be warriors, but through femininity, not through a toxic...
Fighting, right.
Yeah. And so I think he was a great, great futurist, and really an ultimate, like, major fourth wave feminist. But I really do feel that about him just in his teachings. But he said that meditation is really a practice of having the command of your own self-hypnosis, so that anyone who's trying to control your mind or make you think something about yourself or the world doesn't have power over you. And that's meditation.
Wow.
And that, to me, is a very different definition of meditation than these kind of like contemplative, and again, they're beautiful, but like all just very kind of masculine lineages of...
It also set us up to fail. I think, per your conversation about wellness earlier, which often ends up being vanity related instead of joy, the pursuit of joy, or the pursuit of self-protection, to your point, or self-control, which are all really powerful, desirable things, and also really like of a higher spiritual plane than just what we are obsessed with here on the earth. Right. And I think that's the same to your point with meditation. I feel like people don't do it because they they're already self-sabotaging. They're like, oh, well, I can't shut out all the thoughts in my head, so I'm not a meditator.
Right.
And I'm actually a drinker. Yeah. People say, like, oh, I actually will smoke, or I'll drink, or like, people just give up because they are taught about meditation in the wrong way. Totally. Do you want to say it one more time, just so even I can remember? It's just so good, this idea.
About the yogi?
Yeah, no, about meditation as a protection against all of the mind control that society tries to brainwash us with.
Yeah, that's basically the whole. I mean, the bulk of my teachings is around meditation being mind training, so that you can train your mind to basically both kind of like a heat-seeking missile, see what feels and resonates as truth, and what feels and resonates as enlightened society, which is very obvious when you clear the space of what we would call the third eye, but it's the pituitary gland. It's very physiological, these types of things, and the powers that have been in this age that we've come from knew that and know that, else they wouldn't be doing chemtrails and putting fluoride in the water to calcify the pineal gland and mess up the pituitary gland, the endocrine system. So, this isn't really esoteric. This is stuff that has been understood by those who are interested in pulling the strings of the mass
and distracting us.
Yeah.
You're just reminding me. I mean, it's so difficult because in order for me to do the work that I do in this day and age, I'll use things like social media, like going to a club where unfortunately all of the venues where we play music are places where people consume alcohol, where people are half present, just by the nature of the venue. Mm-hmm. Or for me to be on social media in order to broadcast my message, to our point of almost having alternative media to communicate when I'm playing, what my message is, what my intention is, what a learning that I had today. But at the same time, social media is consuming, and it is a distraction, and it does cloud some of our pineal gland, as you say. So I don't know, maybe do you have any advice about how we can live in this grid of a world and not be exiled to the desert?
I'm not into off the grid. I mean, I think that it's good to practice all forms of phenomenal world, like both being unplugged and plugged and plugged to the maximum. And, I think all of it, the soul incarnated in this body at this time on the planet, in the, literally the pressure cooker of the technological age, for a very specific experience. So I feel like running away from that is a waste of time. I mean, a robot just got citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and she has more rights than the women there. Have you heard about this?
I actually thought it was a joke.
It's not a joke.
I thought it was a meme. I thought it was a meme. I know,
girl. I know. So, I mean, it's such a really bizarre time in so many ways, and in such an unprecedented time. So I think that all things should be considered. And if you have the strength of mind that you've trained your mind for through some sort of just even a little bit of conscious breath or a little bit of creativity, I think creativity is a huge part of really having sovereignty and the self-sacredness in this time. I really do, and I want to talk to you about your creativity and your creative process. But so I feel like it doesn't have to be this long drawn out, precious, process. It can be. I mean, you can make it very ritualistic and it is precious, but I also think that there's a way that there's this kind of preciousness around and now I'm going to sit to meditate. It's it doesn't have to be like that. It can be in your car while you're waiting to pick up your kid, or, we all just need, and so just a little bit of some conscious breath or some sort of conscious creativity or even just conscious kindness will give you strength, and that strength will give you the ability to kind of tune into things that you need to and tune out of things that you don't. And then, of course, we're all going to get consumed in it's a wave. You can't run from it's a tidal wave of technology. So then the question is, how do you get stronger? That's my...
You're right. If we actually learn how to create these defenses in the most difficult situation, then if we were in isolation, it's like totally easy peasy.
Right.
But if you learn how to do it in isolation, then when you come back, it's very difficult. And actually, that makes total sense. If you just think about people going away for a 2-week diet or like a 2-week gym, whatever, or a 2-week or a 10-day Vipassana, which is obviously extraordinary, but it's
Beautiful.
true. When you come back, it's really tough to uphold those things that you learned in the context of your day-to-day life. So that's a really good learning, even for me. Like, this year on tour, I was better than ever about keeping my values true even on the road.
Yeah.
Eating
which
clean.
Is hard.
Which was really hard, especially last year, and especially just like noticing that if I'm not intentional about it, I'm very like in the flow and I'll just eat whatever and like have a drink or something like that, when I actually really love to never have a drink, and I really love to like eat vegan and eat clean, and sleep like 8 hours even if I'm on the road, you know, just like these basic things. Go for a run, find like the local like Soul Cycle or whatever in that city, and just hop on a bike or rent a bike. I was in Seattle and the band was leaving at 11 a.m. so I got up at 7 and like rented a street bike and just went around the city for 2 hours, like just something, you know. Found the vegan smoothie place. Like, honestly, it's funny because like I make fun of myself, like I'm like, it's so bougie actually, isn't it? It's like bougie to be like, I want to have almond milk instead of regular milk. It's actually like bougie. It is, but then at the same time, at least it's not something that has like hormones in it, I guess. And if I'm taking whatever little money they're paying me to play a gig and I'm using it to eat greens and raw and eat clean and rent a bike, I suppose that's a better use of my money than buying a beer, you know.
Well, I do feel like where you put your money is very much activism.
Right.
So
voting with your dollar.
Yeah.
And that's actually true, because even after the show, oh my God, this was such an amazing experience. After the show in Eugene, do you know Ani DiFranco?
Yes.
Yes, we just opened for her all of her West Kate dates.
I mean, it
was amazing.
You're both so lucky.
Well, it's so
I mean, seriously.
No, and her audience though are just like they remind me of this conversation, the kinds of conversations that I just had with people, even short. They were already so deep. And one guy came up to us and was like, run my card for $250 just because I want to support. And I want to take $10 off every shirt of the women behind me who are about to buy your merch. So what you're saying is true. People do vote with their dollar, you know?
100%.
And we are in this capitalist system. So to your point about staying in the grid, if we're going to participate and money has a masculine energy, let's at least redirect it how we see fit, you know?
I feel like it's one of the big things of undoing the patriarchal, you know, kind of stain. I don't think it's acting like money is bad. What I've taken it as is like, look, you know, I have to deal with like these douches that own this building. Well, you know what? When I opened a place where I could afford to buy something, I bought the building. So now I'm my own landlord. Like, I couldn't do that in LA yet.
That's an amazing story.
But do you know what I mean? Like, I've had to deal with these guys, and they're like such assholes, and you know, just kind of bullying us and being
so ironic, because that's the opposite intention of this space.
Well, they can't help it. They're attracted to it. It's just like it's like a recess. You know, it's like boys on the you know, they're hitting you because they're attracted to you. But so I you know, I feel, but like the part of my thing was like, well, you know what? I'm sick of dealing with that. So when we open a place in Europe, you know, it's a much less expensive place. I'm like, I'm going to become my own landlord. Yes. And I do think that there's something about that
empowering.
That is so. It was very empowering for me. I remember I used to rent a little apartment. I wish I still had it. Why did I give it away? In Greenpoint when I was, you know, a kid. And it was owned by this beautiful single Polish woman. And I just remember how, like, of course I was like, you know, being naughty in all sorts of ways. And she was always like on my ass about whatever, you know, leaving something on the stoop or whatever. But now looking back on it, I just felt how proud she was to own something and be a woman, be a single woman. And, you know, I understand that now. So I do feel like having that kind of economic sovereignty is really important.
Huge.
Beyond gender, just the people who care create communities and environments that
with their love energy in it.
Yeah. I want to talk about your creativity before we go. I just want to, you know, I'm always curious about creative process and just how the creative spirit moves you.
I create all the time, and my hardest part is finishing. Yeah. My hardest part is finishing, because everything that I create often has the authenticity of the moment and like the spontaneity and joy and emotion of the moment. I always write songs in my car. Like if you open up my voice memos, there's just tons and tons of stuff. And usually when I come home late at night, I'm always writing. Like yesterday I was writing on the guitar. 2 nights ago I was writing on this drum that I have called the Hong drum, which is tuned to a G major chord. And so no matter what part of the drum you hit, it vibrates beautifully. And so then it's easy for me to sing on top of it and write lyrics. And there's somebody who I was like, I was just like remembering an unrequited love experience. And so then it was like so easy for me to just sing about that, you know? And so when I say I write, it means that I turn my iPhone on and record the voice memo. And I usually record, like I let it just go for like 8, 12, 20, 25 minutes. And then from that entire thing, I'll cut a 3-minute song. And actually, it's so perfect that you played the Gandhi Blues when we opened this podcast, because that's exactly how Gandhi Blues was written. It was 2015, and I had just come home from being in a bit of a fight with the person I was seeing at the time, and I felt really upset about it. And I also felt that I was just balancing my travel and my activism poorly with my love life and my personal life and my family, and just being there. Even like next week or this week, I may not be going home for Thanksgiving. And so I'm going to see my family in December, so I don't feel so bad about it. But
you have like the big kind of, you have a big family, demanding family.
We do. And so it's just definitely a thing that I'm not going home this year, and I need that to be okay. But anyway, I share that because
it's the best thing ever. I'm really into not going home for the holidays.
No, it's just because the travel is so intense. But yeah, I was just going to say that Gandhi Blues was written of me being in my room in New York City for like half an hour, 40 minutes, just singing. It was just those exact lyrics. It was like, my voice feels tired, I feel broken, I've been singing you the Gandhi Blues. And I never thought that would actually be appropriate to make a song, because when you're effortless in your intention and you're not doing it for anybody else but for your own catharsis, it's so honest that somebody else listening to it has chills, because they're like, damn, that was so raw. Yeah. And so then when I was working with my team to decide what to call it, they're like, what do you mean? We're definitely calling it the Gandhi Blues. Like that's not there. It's nothing else but that. That's the name of it. Right. So that's how I create. And I think part of my journey right now is to find collaborators who allow me to lead and who allow me to be my fullest authentic self, but then who bring the skill set of finishing, who bring the skill set of adding additional production that beef up the song, that allow me to mix and master it and set a deadline and honor that deadline. Because for me, I'll just be starting and opening new doors forever, because it's so easy for me to create, to write, to speak, to give lyrics. It's very difficult for me to finish and decide like that version of the song is the right one. You know, we as artists, like, especially with music, we'll have 12 different versions of the same song just because the cadence of the vocals are delivered differently. The drum set, the acoustic of the room, the person who mixed it versus mastered it. I mean, that in itself is an overwhelming decision. So that's how I create. It's easy to create on the onset. It's hard to finish.
It really, and I feel like one of the greatest maturations of the creative process is to know the things that where your strengths are, and to amplify those, and find the people who can pick up and are strong in the other places and be, collaborate with you. I really do feel like that's all satisfying, in my opinion, creative processes. Almost all of them are collaborative in one way or the other. Even writing. It's
true.
Even writing, like just writing.
Who inspired us, right.
Yeah, even if it wasn't going to be made into a song and people were going to be producing and mixing and playing on it, it's a collaborative process.
I love that.
And anything else that you want to kind of just put out there to obviously so many women listen to our big part of our audience. Is there anything that you want to? I
think my biggest thing that I would love to share is to practice questioning problematic norms in your day-to-day life. Practice questioning them internally, and then practice saying something out loud about them. Practice saying that to a coworker, to a family member, to a friend, to a partner, to yourself. You know, question things that you've been doing that actually deep down buried are not quite right for you, and practice saying, what's the alternative? Could I change that? Or what would it be like to actually have the bravery to tell this person and to trust them with your emotions and your feelings? And I think failing forward is so important. We are so obsessed with perfection, with things going right, because now with social media, everything just looks perfect all the time, which is not true.
Right.
And I think we should be teaching bravery instead of perfection. What would it be like to have the bravery to tell that coworker that actually this comment that they keep making is actually holding you back, or that if they did X, Y, and Z, it would allow you to be better at your job? Practice the bravery of speaking up, of owning your voice, of having these tough conversations. Because let's say that conversation goes terribly. Now you have facts and an example to learn from and change for the next iteration. Yeah. Everything that I've learned in my tough conversations were because some conversations blew up and were terrible. So that the second time or third time I went in and had them with different people even, it was so much better. It was so much better.
Right.
So I'm really on this tip of like, we have to fail forward. And even in our work, I have to suck before I'm good. I had to have terrible shows before we had this run of Ani DiFranco shows where people came up to us in tears because they loved it so much. But I've had terrible shows where people talk the entire time and don't care and think it's terrible. We have to have the bravery to get on the stage, to own our voice, to practice whatever it is that we want to be better at, so that we can access those good ones.
Yeah. And where can people catch you? Are there more U.S. dates?
Right
there's
now,
India dates.
There's India dates in December, in Pune and Bombay, or Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore. But I always share everything upcoming on my website, madamegandhi.com, and on my social, Madame Gandhi. And I'll say it's spelled M-A-D-A-M-E. Note that E at the end of Madam. And then Gandhi is G-A-N-D-H-I, like Gandhi. But everyone spells Gandhi wrong as well, so that's why I wanted to share.
Really?
Yes, find me on Instagram. Everyone puts the H after the G.
Okay.
They all spell it G-H-A-N-D-I, but it's G-A-N-D-H-I.
Well,
for me and Mahatma and everybody.
I mean, yeah, that's how it's spelled, everyone. So we recommend you. It's a big name in history, so check it out.
Every day, Guru Jagat, every day people spell it wrong. So.
And it's a name that's continuing to make history. So thank you so much for being with us. It was so wonderful to.
I learned a lot in this discussion. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Keep up the amazing work.